All right, everybody. Here it is. Everybody's favorite unit, cell reproduction. This is part one of a three-part series. And today we're going to be looking at why cells reproduce and maybe some game plans on how they accomplish this. As always, here are the learning objectives for the lesson. So keep these in mind as you view the video. You should be able to go ahead and answer these questions and perform all of these tasks by the time you finish. If you need to go back and view the video again or parts of the video, well, that's why it's on video. You can always rewind and see the stuff that you missed. All right, here goes. First question we have to ask ourselves is why the cell has to reproduce in the first place. I mean, why can't it just stay a single cell? Well, there's a bunch of reasons. First off, just imagine yourself as a brave, intrepid explorer, not heading out to the reaches of outer space, but going to inner space. Instead of an astronaut, you're going to be the first cellunaut. You're going to be placed inside a gigantic, enormous, incredibly large cell. And trying to live inside this cell, you're going to need some basic building blocks, some basic resources, some basic things to keep you alive. You need food, you need water, you need oxygen, you need all that stuff. Only problem is, all that stuff is out there. And in order to get from here to here, where you are, you're going to have to go ahead and bring that stuff through the only entrance, that's the cell membrane, all the way through that cytoplasm until it gets to you. Well, all well and good, but you know what you're doing inside that cell? All alone, in the dark, by yourself. Yep, you guessed it. You're creating wastes. And those wastes are building up all around you. Matter of fact, you're going to poison yourself with your own wastes. And the only way to get those wastes away from you is to go ahead and, once again, cross all that cytoplasm to an exit point. Then and only then are you going to be able to survive. So you're kind of sort of faced with a packaging problem. The cell is just too big. There's no way you can get stuff into or out of it fast enough. A very simple solution to this is to go ahead and put yourself inside a tiny cell. If the cell is smaller, then hey, you've got an entry and exit within arm's reach. It's much easier to go ahead and transport stuff into and out of smaller cells than it is to larger cells. So there you go. One major reason cells divide is because there is truly a limit to how much they can grow. If they grow too big, it just becomes too hard to get stuff into or out of them fast enough. Thus, one method of solving the problem is to go ahead, divide, and make sure that your cells are relatively small. Another reason for cells to divide is, well, in multicellular organisms, if you want the organism to grow, you're going to have to add more cells. There's really not that much difference in the size of cells between organism number 1 and organism number 2. It's just that organism 2 has a whole lot more cells. In addition, adding more cells allows for some flexibility and specificity, and you can have some division of labor. Different types of cells can do different things. Another challenge you'll find is that, hey, cells don't last forever. They get injured, they get worn out, They got to be replaced. Eventually, hey, cells just like us die. So those have to be replaced. If we look at skin cells basically have a definite lifespan. Our skin is arranged in layers. Layers like an ogre or an onion. Anyway, the first layer of skin cells is actually dead. And that's right, when you're holding the hand of that very special someone, what you're actually clinging to is a bunch of old, dead, crusty skin cells. You actually lose these skin cells by the tens of millions every day. You don't have to worry about it because, hey, the next layer of skin just underneath that epidermis goes ahead and replaces them just as fast as you lose them. Fact is, though, if you didn't have anything to replace those dead cells, that upper layer, you'd just essentially be worn away until, heck, there'd be nothing left. Finally, hey, you have to eventually allow for reproduction of the entire organism. For some cells, this can be as simple as just dividing in half. For others, it's a little bit more complex, and you're going to have to go ahead and make special reproductive cells like sperm or egg. So let's look at a couple of these different types of reproductive issues. In asexual reproduction, you just need a single parent. No mates, nothing, just you. You'd be walking along one day, decided, hey, it's a good idea, I think I'm going to reproduce. And just like that, there's two of you. The big advantage to this is it's faster, it's easier, and you don't have the tremendous energy expenditure you have with sexual reproduction. As a matter of fact, think about it. In sexual reproduction, you spend a lot of time and energy trying to find a mate. But here, a lot less energy. The disadvantage, though, is that the offspring that are created are pretty much carbon copy clones of everybody else. Which might seem like a good idea if you think you're the ultimate organism, but heck, if there's something out there in the environment that's likely to kill one offspring, then chances are it's probably going to kill the others as well. So if you want long-term survival of the entire species, probably not the best game plan. In sexual reproduction, well, hey, the offspring that are produced are genetically unique. They're all different. At first glance, that might seem like that's not necessarily true, but actually, it is. Even your brothers and sisters are slightly different than you. And one of the reasons for this is that, well, males, the sperm that you're producing by the tens of millions right now, well, each one of those sperm cells is genetically unique. The chances of one sperm cell having the same genetic information as another sperm cell, astronomically against. It's just not going to happen. Ladies, the egg cells which you already produced, and you got about 1 million egg cells per ovary, you were producing those back when you were in your mom's uterus. Yeah, before you were born, you were busy producing eggs. Well, all the eggs you have also are genetically unique. Chances of the exact same genes in an egg cell being present in a second egg cell, probably never going to happen. Therefore, hey, offspring are going to be unique. Therefore, if there's something out there that might kill one individual, it may or may not kill the other. So, greater survival rates among offspring are probably better, and the chances for adaptation and long-term survival of the species is better. Of course, it does take a lot more energy, and you do have to go ahead and spend that time looking for a mate. But, hey, what the heck? You might end up with something like these, and it's all worthwhile. Before we get back to sexual reproduction, let's just look at some types of asexual reproduction. First, most simplest form is something called binary fission. Now, if we're talking about a single parent cell, we're just talking about this single cell splitting in half and getting two daughter cells. Now, before it does that, you have to go ahead and make an identical copy of all the genetic informations and all of the instructions that are contained within the nucleus. So you actually have to go ahead and make a duplicate nucleus first and then divide it in half. That's what these puppies are doing here. Original parent cell, nucleus is dividing. Now we've got two nuclei, and now the entire cells can divide. Generally speaking, the resulting daughter cells should be alike in size and shape and the type and amount of genetic information that they carry. They should be identical to each other, and they should be identical to the original parent. Interestingly enough, there are some multicellular organisms that can do the same thing. They can literally split in half. The guy down here is something called planaria, or a flatworm. Actually, this one is a species Dugezia, or genus Dugezia, but it's literally splitting in half. And more about these guys later. These are interesting critters. They can do a lot of things that we can't do. One of the drawbacks of simple binary fission in cells is that the daughter cells that result are smaller than the original parent, and they have to kind of sort of grow up. Some cells get by doing something called budding. These yeast cells over here will go ahead and just duplicate the nucleus and then pinch off a small amount of cytoplasm. The parent cell still retains most of the cytoplasm, can go about its own daily business. Now the young bud, it takes a while for it to grow up, but hey, at least the parent can go ahead and continue along its own lifestyle. Budding can occur in some larger organisms too, sponges, jellyfish, things like that. The little guy down here is something called a hydra. And if you look real carefully, there's a small outgrowth right there at its base. And given time, it gets bigger and bigger and bigger until eventually it looks just like the parent and will kind of sort of just fall off and live its own normal independent life. Many bacteria and fungi have a really, really cool way of spreading offspring very, very quickly. Imagine a cell, a parent cell, and it has a nucleus, but it goes ahead and duplicates its nucleus. It splits in half, but then each of these will in turn immediately reproduce a nucleus and split in half, and eventually this happens again and again and again and again and again. So imagine these things making lots and lots of individual tiny, tiny cells, each with its own nucleus, but with very, very little cytoplasm. Now, cells are tiny to begin with, but shoot, if you divide this thing hundreds of times, imagine how tiny you'd be. These tiny spores would essentially be so small they could float in wind currents or various fluid currents and spread everywhere. As a matter of fact, there are bacterial spores right now and fungal spores falling on your head, your shoulders. You're breathing them in. Matter of fact, you'd be killed by all these spores just sprouting in your lungs if it weren't for all the really cool defense mechanisms that you have inside you that's killing them. So, yeah, spore formation, really, really good way to spread your offspring quickly. Plants are more weird than you could possibly imagine. And it turns out that some of them will go ahead and have no need to worry about reproduction because they'll have small little buds or growths or just almost any plant part that just kind of sort of will grow into new plants. The puppy right here is something called a kalanchoe. And at the edge of its leaves, it looks like small, tiny, miniature plants, and that's exactly what they are. They will grow as little tiny outgrowths. All you got to do is brush up against these things, they fall off, and they'll grow into new plants. Strawberry plants, hey, they do this naturally by sending out little runners or little rhizomes from the stems. They'll go off in different directions. And the original parent plant might have several of these runners extending outward. And the new plants that develop are completely and totally independent of the parents. All you got to do is whack off the runner, and hey, they live their own independent life. But it gets weirder than that, because you can take leaf tissue, just part of a leaf, treat it with the right hormones, and you can get that leaf tissue to develop stem and root tissue. It'll grow into a new plant. You can do the same thing with the stem. Treat it with the appropriate hormone, it'll develop new leaves and new roots. And yep, the roots will do the same thing. Yeah, definitely. Plants are weird. Of course, there's some weird things in animals too. Most folks know that if you grab a lizard by its tail, oftentimes the tail just falls off, and the lizard will eventually grow a new tail. You take a sea star and chop off one of its arms, and lo and behold, it'll grow a new arm. But some critters take that one step further. The flatworms that we were talking about earlier, remember the one that was splitting in half? You could take a flatworm and you could essentially cut it into 3 pieces. The head would grow a new midsection and tail. The midsection would grow a new head and tail. The tail would grow a new midsection and head. Hard to kill. Actually, they have kind of sort of paired nerve cords running from head to tail. And as long as each section has at least a portion of those nerve cords intact, it will go ahead and survive and grow into a new animal. Similarly, sea stars, you chop off one of the arms, well, all that will happen will grow a new arm. But if you were to section it this way, the right half would grow a new left half, the left half would grow a new right half. They have a circular nerve cord that goes in the center of the animal there. And as long as a section of that nerve cord is intact, or I should say a large enough section of that nerve cord is intact, it's capable of growing into a new animal. This is a process called fragmentation. Kind of cool. So regeneration is just regrowth of lost parts. Fragmentation, the growth of entire new individuals from those parts. Now, sexual reproduction obviously involves 2 individuals getting together, and it also involves the production of specialized cells called gametes. We all know these now as sperm and egg. Gametes is just a specialized term. You're going to have to go ahead and keep that as a part of your normal working vocabulary here. Well, what makes gametes so special is that they're really carrying their own set of chromosomes from each parent. So, not that anybody really wants to think of their father's sperm cell, but their father's sperm cell is going to go ahead and carry one set of genetic information. Your mother's egg cell is going to be carrying one set of genetic information. The genetic information is going to be carried on special structures called chromosomes. More about that later. But since each gamete has only one set of chromosomes, right, they're given the term haploid. So ploidy is the term given to sets of chromosomes. Haploid just means one set of chromosomes. Sometimes it's given the designation 1N or just simply N, and that is the number of sets of chromosomes. In humans, the normal complement of chromosomes in a sperm cell would be 23, and of course the egg would also be carrying 23. So if we have a fertilized egg, you'll have, of course, 23 plus 23 is 46. Okay. Now, the fertilized egg is known as a zygote. Since it has two sets of chromosomes, one from sperm and one from eggs, it is known as diploid. Diploid, sometimes given the designation 2N, means you've got two sets of chromosomes. Now, here's the deal. If sperm and egg were diploid, right, sperm would carry 46 chromosomes, egg carrying 46 chromosomes, you'd end up with 92 chromosomes in a zygote, and that's not going to work. The normal diploid number for human cells is always going to be 46. The only way to get 46 chromosomes in your zygote is to start out with gametes that only have 23 chromosomes. How do you do that? Well, we're going to show you how to do that in part 3 of this series. And finally, you guessed it, another practice quiz. Truly a practice quiz. So if you can do this without notes, fantastic. If, however, you need to go back and check your notes or check your video again, feel free. It is indeed just a practice. However, it's worth points. So make sure that you're able to do this. And after completion, you should be ready for the classroom quiz. Anyway, good luck.